This is the Truth Be Told podcast, where we unlock the secrets of strategic communication. Communication is the centerpiece of our podcast, usually focused on the human element. However, today we're going to explore how artificial intelligence impacts the way we both receive and provide information. My guest today is Tom Ehan, the CEO of Control Tech. Tom is responsible for steering the company's strategic vision and making high-level decisions that drive the growth and innovation of the organization. Tom focuses on fostering strategic partnerships, exploring new market opportunities, and ensuring that Control Tech's technological advancements, including artificial intelligence and machine learning, align with Control Tech's mission to enhance security and operational efficiency. Tom is well known in the retail loss prevention world as both a tremendously effective LP professional and, as you see today, a thought leader who unselfishly shares his knowledge and experience out of a genuine desire to help his peers fight crime more effectively. He shares his wealth of knowledge and expertise in his roles as retail technology editor at Loss Prevention Magazine, host of the Cash News podcast, co-host of the Loss Prevention Research Council podcast, Crime Science, and the organization's senior technology advisor. Before we get into deepfakes, artificial intelligence, and a special visit from a guest at ChatGPT, a quick thank you to Control Tech for supporting this episode of Truth Be Told.
What makes Control Tech unique in the RFID space is that we're focused really on RFID and how it works to solve complex problems. We sit down with our customers and understand what their challenge is, and we come up with the right mix of hardware, software, the type of tag, and then the process that's needed. We're agnostic. We're not trying to stick you with a specific product category or of hardware tags. We're really focused on making the technology work in the environments.
Welcome to this episode of the Truth Be Told podcast. I'm your host, Dave Thompson. I am here with my good friend, Tom Ehan. How are you, Tom?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's excited to see you in this format. We're usually at a conference together, or maybe at a local bar or some late night food shop.
Potentially at a local bar. That's what I said. It's kind of my favorite thing is people will go like, "Do you remember where we met?" And I'm at a bar. Is it possible after a trade show? Like that's usually kind of the theme.
Well, one of the problems with that, and what we'll talk about today, is one of the last times I saw you, it wasn't just Tom at the bar. It was Tom and his AI friend, his voice assist, that we're going to explore a little bit today. But I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of scary, but how much technology is listening to us and some of the information that AI has brought us. And so we're going to get into all that. But before I keep saying AI about a million times, what is that? What is AI for people that are hearing that all the time?
Yeah, I think it's probably the thing that I talk about the most when we think about artificial intelligence. I keep hearing this, it's new. And I think if anybody listens to this, it's not new. Artificial intelligence has been around literally since the 40s. And very, very basic, simple way to put it, I tend to try to oversimplify everything because I'm not that smart, is it's just a computer mimicking human intelligence or human behavior. And I think what happened is when OpenAI put out ChatGPT to the consumer population a little bit over 2 years ago, it became, wow, there's this new AI. But I often talk about the easiest, and it depends on what age group you're in and the listeners, is the easiest thing to talk about is the automatic teller machine, an ATM, is like the most widely used globally thing that people understand is that is AI at its core. We used to have a bank teller sit there and do all of this manually, and we were able to take a computer and mimic human intelligence or human behavior. And certainly it's a buzz today because of some of the things, you mentioned our intelligent assistant talking to us, potentially at a late night snack, but then going to a trade show and saying, this isn't the same AI as an ATM. But at the end of the day, what we're doing constantly with AI, whether it's machine learning, generative AI, natural language processing, deep neural networks, whichever of the AIs you want to talk about, we can go on for hours here. It is taking what once only a human can do and having a machine or a computer do it.
Yeah, and that's a good example. The ATM, right? Hopefully most people still know what that is. But I think about in any technology, and we'll dive into this. One of the main purposes is efficiency. So the ATM is nice because you don't have to go into the bank. It's the best machine at the casino because it always wins. But when you have technology, you're going to have risk and fraud. And the ATM, I know, has evolved over the last decade just to protect that type of fraud. So I think we'll talk a lot about for whether you're in an investigative world or just a parent or a voter or whoever you are, the benefits and risks of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with any technology, there's always that pendulum of risk or benefit. And I say this often as we've proven time and time again that humans can't always have nice things. So, unfortunately, all of the good that comes with technology and especially advanced technology like AI, there's always that deviant side of it. And then there's this misunderstanding side. I think that's the thing that I talk about probably the most when I talk to folks about AI is that it's not bad or good. It's like any other technology. It's how it's utilized and what you're using it for. And no surprise to anybody listening to the podcast. Sometimes the media tends to talk about the negative versus the positive. And even when I talk about AI, I'm a risk person, right? I don't really talk as much about the positive because people are more interested in the risk, not the good side of it. So I think when I present about artificial intelligence, 70% of it is on risk. The 30% that's on the positive is never what anybody comes back and asks you about. So I guess I'm guilty of that as well.
Right. And we're going to get into things like deepfakes, how to tell what's real and what's not, these recordings that people have of your own voice, how those can be used for some ill intent. We're going to get into all of that, but I want to just go backwards a little bit. I know right now you're the CEO of Control Tech. Congratulations,
Thank you.
incredible career. But what got you into this interest of technology in the first place? And we go back to working in the field, but kind of maybe the high level of your career and what brought you here today.
Yeah, so I've always been a technology guy since, that's what, I think everybody who's in any investigative capacity probably has a similar story. I went to school for IT. I was always a tinkerer and, I'm not a young guy, I'm not an old guy, but, when I went to school, IT wasn't IT that was today. I grew up with essentially no internet. When I was in my last years of high school, there was Prodigy, and AOL was just coming to the world, and cell phones were just coming to the world. But I always had this, passion for information and technology, and I think at one point, probably like a lot of folks that are in investigations, I wanted to be in law enforcement, but it always led back to technology, and so. Probably for the last 20 of the 27 years that I've been working, I took a passion in anything related to tech, and AI was always there in some fashion, usually through data analytics. And much like you, I was in the fields and doing investigations, running around catching shoplifters, and I feel like the evolution of technology in retail went very well with my career path. And in retail, I ended up with a heavy focus on technology, and came to Control Tech, which has a massive technology division. And really, when I started at Control Tech, my role was product focused, technology focused. That's what I came here to do, and evolved into the business role. But with everything, and I say this often every time I get a chance to, is that we live in the best time that you could ever live in to learn. Every bit of information is available, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you don't like to read, you can watch a YouTube video. If you don't like to watch, you can listen to a podcast, you can listen to audiobook. So you have an endless amount of availability to information today. And I think I took advantage of that my whole entire adult life. Not when I was younger, but my whole entire adult life. The recipe was like, hey, if I want to learn this, it's available. I can take a class, I can read about it. And it's been a passion of mine, and continues to be a passion. I am a little bit of a gadget person, but now I'm really focused more on, how does technology help folks, and what are some of the things that people should be worried about with technology.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I know, as you know, and I'm sure you're a loyal listener to our podcast, and I've heard you on plenty of the ones that you're co-hosting and appear on. communication is kind of the common theme to everything that we talk about, and you're talking about it through a different venue, which is the tech space. There's different types of AI that I've heard you discuss, and if we go back to this to Chat GPT, because that's probably the most, I guess, most public right now or common of what people are using. So I've seen it used. I'm curious what you think about this, but I've seen it used for marketing teams, right? They can put in what are top 10 things my customers are struggling with, and it helps create something. I've seen it used to write an article or maybe an outline of an article. But I've also seen it used where students are using it to basically create their essay response to a paper. They're not writing anything themselves. A colleague of mine is a law professor and had a law student write a case brief through Chat GPT. And so first maybe talk about that and how do people differentiate from this was written authentically and it's a good outline maybe through AI, or this is just plagiarized.
Yeah, so I think it's a really hard one to tackle today because as the tools, when ChatGPT 2 years ago first came out, there were a lot of tools to identify what AI is. And now you're starting to get into this humanized AI. You're also getting into this thing where we're interesting creatures, right? If you use AI to proofread a document, and you're a writer, you will start to change your writing style based on that. And I'm starting to see that even with people I know personally, whether they're going like, I'm starting to change the way I do things. That's not good or bad. It's just, what does that mean? It means that they're grammatically correct because AI is saying like, hey, you've been writing this wrong. The plagiarism piece, I equate it to, and this is probably not the answer that everybody wants me to say is it different than someone copying and pasting something and wordsmithing it? Is it really different, or is it the perception that it's different because it's faster? And that's, I am, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I'm not sure that it's much different than me going on copying and pasting things and changing things. And there's a tool called Grammarly that a lot of people used for many years that now has Gen AI into it that would rewrite sentences for you, that would just take the grammar and do it and do plagiarism checks. And I would argue that there's certainly, you shouldn't be copying folks' work, you shouldn't be cheating, but this is going to be a bold statement. I think if you're not figuring out how to use AI in your workflow as a student, it's going to be a problem for you. And I think as a professor, if you're not figuring out how to lay the groundwork of what you should and shouldn't do, it's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge because we're at the point now where the reality is, if you know how to use AI, it isn't detectable. It isn't detectable. The risk for a student, I would say, if I'm a law student, is the risk is the person's not learning. Like that's to me, that's the risk. It's not that they're figuring out a faster way to write their paper. Are they actually going to learn what they need to learn to apply it in the real world?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think what I've seen is from an efficiency standpoint, writing, I've used it. If I had to write a press release, instead of writing the whole press release, at least give me an outline and then I can take it from there, right? If you have writer's block, it's kind of a good start for you, but it still forces you to do that research and learn about the topic and craft it in your own language. What I've also seen, I know there's a term for this, so you can explain it better, but I've seen the same example of a law student writing a case brief where maybe it's cited cases that don't actually even exist, research papers that don't exist. Because I'm a loyal Buffalo Bills fan, so I asked ChatGPT, write me a press release for when the Bills win the Super Bowl, and it created a beautiful press release. Players that don't exist, coaches that don't exist. What is that, and how do we be aware? How are we aware of that?
So hallucination is what you'll hear the term, and basically to oversimplify it is ChatGPT, or let's say generative AI, because I think you're going to start to see a change, and we'll talk about that later in what it is ChatGPT is a brand. OpenAI owns them, and it's like Polaroid or Xerox. If where people say a Polaroid camera, well, Polaroid made the first instant camera. Xerox made the first well-known copying machine. It's like Nokia used to be the phone that people would refer to, but it was a first smartphone. So when ChatGPT, when you talk about it, let's just talk about generative AI, because this is a problem with whether you're using Google's Gemini, if you're using a French model called Mistral, if you're using any of them, Facebook's Meta's Llama. Hallucination is because the models want to give you an answer. So the way they're built is they're built under the premise of I want to give Dave the best answer possible. If I can't find it, I'm going to make it up. And one of the things about AI, especially generative AI, that creeps people out or makes people uncomfortable is however much we know about it, we don't always know why it does things or how it comes up with the answers. So there's this hallucination is it wants to answer your question, so it's going to find an answer. And the more I do feel like we're getting better at fixing that, but there have been multiple cases and some pretty bad where people have used generative AI and it's given some really bad examples. And your Buffalo Bills one is an awesome one, but that's just ChatGPT saying like, I want to answer Dave's question. If you ask the question with more specificity and you prompt it differently, you'll get a different answer. If you say what year, if the Buffalo Bills were to win the Super Bowl in 1985, you would get a different answer than if you didn't put that. So the question you ask, the more specific the question. This is one of the reasons why I worry about your previous conversation about plagiarism is there's a fine line of sometimes hallucination or not. Like you don't always know. It isn't always that easy to find it. And then I don't know if we'll get a chance to chat about it today. There's also this other thing that isn't widely talked about, which is called a black box event, which is not hallucination. It's when the generative AI figures something out that it shouldn't be able to figure out. And what I mean by that is the example I like to give, although I can't explain it in a mathematical way because I'm not a math guy. I'm an investigator turned CEO. That was an IT guy. Is MIT was doing some testing, and they threw math questions that were never solved by a human, and ChatGPT figured them out. My first question is, how do you know it's right if we could ever solve it? But I was told by someone way smarter than me that was a silly question because they were able to do the operation. And then so the ChatGPT figured out things that the model doesn't actually have. And then there are numerous examples of ChatGPT learning languages that it didn't have in the model, and even one where it created a language. That's a black box event. And the fear there is like, well, if we don't understand how it's doing that, what else is going on? And there are a lot of theories on it. The theory on math, the math equation one, was that it had all of the math ever done on the internet there. So it just basically took all that information together and in real time said, well, the answer's there. You just, as a human, can't think as fast as me. And then the language one is, well, I have 12 dialects. The 14th and 15th dialect is similar enough that I was able to figure it out, much like humans. And I go back to consistently saying this, and I can't take credit for this. I think Satya Nadella and a couple really high-powered CEOs said this not together is, we don't actually fully understand how the human brain works today. So it's okay that we don't understand how AI works, but that's kind of the creep factor. I mean, there are great examples of hallucination where it makes things up, and then there are great examples where it figures things out it's not supposed to, and they're two totally different things, but they're the things that I often say. And, if you're using it in your workflow, hopefully after you listen to this podcast, you're already subscribed, you're going to give us a great rating. Right. But also you're going to go and you're going to remind yourself of every time you use AI that just double, triple check it. It's just the same as, when you use spell check or autocorrect on your phone. I don't know how many text messages I've sent in my life that said wildly inappropriate things because autocorrected it. And it was like, oh, that's just autocorrect. I think we're going to get to the point where we're going like, that's just ChatGPT. Like, it's just, it's the same kind of realm. And I mean, you ever go online on a Reddit forum and see all the crazy autocorrect stuff? It is at a much larger scale because of the pieces of it. But I do think as humans, we're going to accept that there's some mistakes that occur, but we can't do that in legal fields. We can't do that in the medical field. We can't do that in places like that. But the reality is, you and I both know we still will.
Yeah. I'm picturing even predictive texting or writing is so much more prevalent. I was putting together a PowerPoint over the weekend, and as I'm typing bullet points, it's suggesting what the next word's going to be, which is great. And I'm thinking, I thought I was a smart guy, but apparently the computer can do it for me at this point, which is a little disheartening. Where is AI getting all this information from? Is it a lot of personal tracking of what we're typing and doing, or is it more consensus?
Yeah, so I think that if we're talking about Gen AI or like a ChatGPT, a Gemini, a Llama, there's a couple different ways it works. So let's start with the way it started, and you'll hear the word large language model or LLM. Um, and basically, what some of these companies did is they took all of the information that was available on the internet and both understand. So speaking of AI, someone hears us talking, so this is great. They thought I called Siri,
Honestly,
thinks I called her.
this is
I didn't.
perfect.
But basically, they take all of the information on the internet and they scrape it, both what's visible to us and what's not. So, like when we talk about the internet, we are the open web. You put CNN.com, that's the open web. You put w/c.com, that's the open web. Truth be told, that's the open web. But then there's this deep web, which isn't bad, which is where everything else lives and isn't, unless you know the address, you're not going to find it. It's not the dark web. It's not secret squirrel stuff. It's just all the indexed pages on everybody's website. So essentially, these companies went out and they captured all of that, took all of it and they put it in what's called a large language model. And then the generative piece of it is they created, and this is where the T comes in, the transition, they created this way to take that data by prompting it and asking it a question and in almost real time get the information. So I usually oversimplify Gen AI and say like envision spell check on steroids or Google search on steroids where it has access to everything. It listens to your question and then answers it. And I don't know, years ago when Google released, maybe 10 years ago, Google, people would put in, it would be like the thing you do. You put in, there's a term for it, and I can't draw a blank. You put something in to a search bar and wait to see what it finished. And it would finish the sentence based on what most people were searching. So what ChatGPT is doing is it's saying, I have all this information, and if I ask a question, I get the answer. So I often, if I'm doing this presentation, I often ask an audience, what do you think of when I say peanut butter? And everybody says jelly. I mean, literally, and I've done it in multiple countries. And I'm like, great, that's exactly how generative AI does. It goes, I think the logical answer after is jelly, so I'll say it. But then if you ask it a deeper question of what can you do with peanut butter, how is peanut made, you get a more specific answer. That's the good part, right? Like that's the part that is very positive about ChatGPT, and we haven't talked about Anthropic, which is the Claude, which is the competitor, like or any of the competitors. Here's where it changes a little bit. If you took Facebook's large language model, their competition to ChatGPT, it's called Llama. You'll hear like Meta AI. If you use WhatsApp, it's in WhatsApp. You can actually click on it and ask it. And so Meta AI is powered by their name is Llama, and that's their ChatGPT. So Meta, not only did it take everything from the internet, but it also took everything from Facebook and places where they had access to it. Now, not private data, at least that's what we think, but the public data in places that you might not be able to scrape from the internet as easily. So there is a level of when you read the terms of services with some of these companies that where they're taking their data from. And we're in this quasi weird where like you'll see lawsuits of ChatGPT or OpenAI is being sued by news agencies saying that's our data you're using, you didn't have our permission. And so I think we're in this slippery slope of copyrighted information. Well, if it was free and open to everybody, is it fair use? And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get into the fair use. I'm not. I don't know. My opinion is very much like, well, I guess it depends, and you can't say that when it comes to legal stuff. But so a lot of companies getting in front of it. The Wall Street Journal was one of the first big ones. Was like, hey, you want to use our data? Let's come up with a licensing agreement, and you can have all of it, which to me makes sense. But then I kind of go down the path of, well, if it was available on the internet, this is Tom's opinion, so I want to make sure I have his.
No legal advice
No
provided by
legal
truth be
advice.
told.
If I can come up with a way to do it faster, and that's why it's a problem. Like I'm not sure. I want to see what the courts say about that because the information was available, but because it took me a long time to gather it, now it's a problem. And then some of these cases that we're seeing, where companies are trying to trick ChatGPT to replicate stories, they don't happen by accident. I can trick it. It's called prompt engineering to tell me it a certain way. But there is an element here that's how it started. Now you'll see that all of the models, there's an option to opt out of almost all of them, is that, hey, I'm going to learn from your data. Like, I'm going to learn from the questions you ask. And there's a privacy risk there, but it's not as simple as everybody thinks. It's not like, this is what I'll say, is like you and I did this. Like, we were talking, we were having a few cheeseburgers and chicken rings, and we were talking. And so ChatGPT remembers that conversation and brings it into their model, but you can't regurgitate it. I can't go back and search it in the way in the way it was. So if I went and searched, it wouldn't be like, well, Tom was sitting here talking to so-and-so. What it would do is it would be like, Dave Thompson, Wicklander, certified forensic interviewer, expert, talks about this. It would actually add to the model more about Dave Thompson based on what it learned when we were talking. So I'm not sure I'm concerned about that. I could, again, bad people will do bad things. I think what's most important for everybody is you understand that the information you're putting in is what's being happening. So if you work for, like we work for companies that you might not want to put everything into it, right? Like
Right.
you might not want to put investigative information into it because it's going to consume that. Is there risk? Yes. Is it the same as you copying in a form? No.
And you mentioned Google before, and I was picturing you and I both sat through some presentations, and Google's been a great partner of educating us in some of their AI and what they've been doing. But from a consumer standpoint, so anybody listening that has bought something offline, I remember them, and I'm probably going to butcher the way they explain this, but in the past you could go on Google or Amazon Shopping or whatever it might be, and maybe I'm looking for like a dark blue button-down shirt for a wedding or something.
Yep.
And when I search those things, I get a bunch of dark blue shirts. Maybe I get some that are blazers, some that are button-downs, but they're not blue. And it's kind of category or isolating each one of those search terms. What they're explaining to us, and you can explain it much better, is how the machine has learned from my searches in the past. And if I say I'm going to go to this wedding and it's in November, maybe it knows my size because I've bought it before. It knows like the seasonality. And so I think there's obviously some efficiency there, but maybe people don't even realize how much better search results are now based off of your history.
Yeah, I use the Amazon angle. Like Amazon now, if I order something, this is like a pretty cool, like they're getting really good. This isn't Gen AI. This is artificial intelligence with machine learning. It's like, Tom, this isn't going to fit you. Like it literally will say, based on your previous purchases, this will not fit you. Like it
Boy,
will
that
flag.
hurts. When you
It does, right? Like it does hurt. But at the same time, it's like someone, I don't know about you. I like when things recommend things that will fit me. I like
Right.
when things are what I like. And I'm a fan of with clothing going and trying it on, but I don't have that luxury all the time. So when I was just recently going on vacation with the family, typical, I don't know, folks, you get appreciate just traveling every week, and it's like, man, I don't even know, like I just need some summer non-business attire, and I went on and I ordered it, and it was like, based on your shopping habits and your return pattern, this won't fit you. And while at first, yes, I was like, oh man, like, I really wish it did. At the second point, it's like, it's nice to not get something that I need and not have to go through the aggravation. And that's the same exact thing that you're referring to. And look, Google makes their money on ad dollars. So it's their life depends on getting you the right ads. And we have this this is like a real thing. It's called remarketing. I know we heard our friend Siri talk a minute ago because she thought she heard her name.
Talking to me now too.
See,
Your
I'm not
Siri's
supposed to do
talking to
that.
my Siri.
Yeah,
Perfect
Siri,
timing.
yeah, we sound that much alike. Wow.
Yeah.
So, I would say like there's this perception of like your phone's always listening to you. Well, first of all, it might be depending on your settings, but the way remarketing works is, and this will happen to you and I, by the way, is you and I could both be together, sitting together, in Kentucky, talking about something, and our phones see that we're together and see that we have similar search histories, similar purchasing histories, and recommend similar things. And people go, the phone was listening. No, it's just the algorithms are that good that they go, similar age bracket, both have beards, both like you drink the same things. And they know this because we look at the same things, we read the same things, and they'll start to recommend the same things. And it's eerie and frightening for some, but the reality is that's how good the algorithms are. So we give our phones permission, and I talk about this all the time, that if you use just any of the, it doesn't matter whose, anybody's app to buy food, we're giving them permission to use that data. And my favorite term in any terms of services is, from time to time, we share your data with trusted partners. And immediately, like I say, well, I don't know who the trusted partner is. And I don't care. Like, you send me the right ad, I'm happy. If you can get me the shirt that fits, if you can get me the book I want to read, I'm a happy camper, because I am out, just like you. I speak professionally, my voice, my video, my pictures everywhere, and it's okay. That's the choice that I made. But if you can make life more convenient for me with that, I'm happy. And I am the guy that reads it. What I often say is make sure that we understand what is not being sent out and what is being sent out to people. What do you know? And it's so funny because the remarketing thing is like, the phone was listening to me and I'm like, no, we're literally together searching, like looking things up together. And then it goes, all right, Dave and Tom, interesting enough, they both know Wayne Hoover. They both know this person because they can see who we're connected to. Right. By the way, we've given them permission to look at our contacts at one point. And now all of a sudden, they can actually formulate an algorithm that says, I bet you they both like this coffee. I bet you they both like this sport. I bet you they both like this team. That's AI. It's a different type of AI than Gen AI. What's really exciting is, imagine when you get the Gen AI, and we're starting to see that together, where you could go like, I'm about to meet with Dave Thompson. What would Dave like to buy? And then frightening, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But that's where we're kind of almost heading in an opt-in situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Terrifying, but it could make communication that much better, right? If you can be a little more prepared, whether it's an investigative conversation or just a sales pitch or whatever, a first date, right? Whatever it might be. So we both mentioned, I'm not going to say her name because she'll speak up again, but SIRI, as well as Alexa, and so that I start to think about this voice assist, right? And you've done some pretty neat stuff with this during your presentations, but maybe what is that first? And I think Alexa's probably not as advanced as what we're seeing in today's space.
So this is so there's a term called weak AI, and I think it's a type of AI. People think weak means bad, but what Alexa or SIRI are right now, and this is changing in real time. You maybe even by the time you hear this podcast, you'll see differences in it. Are weak. They're actually great examples of weak AI. They can answer questions, which means if you ask what the weather is, it knows. If you ask a question, it knows. Any of the assistants that were previously out and they're evolving in real time, literally real time as we're talking. They're pushing new things. Those were voice assistants. There was nothing wrong with them. Like, what do I have scheduled at 10 p.m.? Can you send me directions here? Very narrow questions, right? Question and answer. Like, if you think of it, if you ask it a complex question, it's going to go, I don't know, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. That's changing in real time. We are in the actual age of intelligent voice assistant. They've already made the announcement with Alexa will have a paid intelligent voice assistant that will be powered by Gen AI. Apple has already said Apple Intelligence, so probably it's any day now. You'll see an intelligent SIR, which will be able to have this conversation with you. And let's try it. We're going to try the ChatGPT one now. This is the new version, so let's see. Okay. Let's see, I don't know how the audio is going to sound, so we're going to maybe I'll turn.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Tom. What's on your mind today?
I am actually doing a live podcast with Dave Thompson.
That sounds exciting. What's the podcast about?
Artificial intelligence.
Fantastic.
Dave, what's the podcast about?
We're talking about effective communication strategies.
Got it, Dave. So we'll be focusing on effective communication strategies. Tom, it sounds like you'll be diving
Hold on one sec. I'm sorry to interrupt you. What's your name?
I'm ChatGPT. Nice to meet you, Dave. Let's get back to those effective communication strategies.
What can you tell us about voice assistants? How are you different than an Alexa?
Sure thing, Dave. So voice assistants like me, ChatGPT, and others like Alexa are both designed to help users with
Okay.
various tasks.
Thank you very
Alexa
much.
is-
We're going to go back to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dave and Tom. Enjoy the podcast.
So you could not do that with Siri
Right.
today.
Yeah.
You could not do that with Alexa, but you will be able to. And this is a great, and we didn't plan that, which is why I like doing this. It's a great example of we could have a pretty fluent conversation in real time with it, and it's not always going to be right. But I would argue, Dave, just like if someone asked you or I a question, we're not always going to be right. We
Right.
could misunderstand. So I struggle with the challenge that people are like, it should be perfect. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't. That's when you need to be afraid. We need to be afraid when it really is perfect, because
Right.
then we're in trouble. Right now, this is just a good technology where if we asked it, we were playing around. If we asked it a technical question, we'd get a pretty good technical answer.
I think that's pretty neat. Can we ask it another question?
Absolutely. Let's go back. And it's interesting. So we must sound more alike than we think, because
Right.
all of our devices think we do, although I think your voice is better. And this is the newest model. So let's see. Get it back up. Start her back up. And do you want to use her, or you want to try a different one?
We can try her. I want to ask her if she can do a little introduction of my guest and see if she what she knows about you.
She probably won't, because I'm not that important.
Oh, yes, you are.
Go ahead. We're back. Dave has a question for you. This is Tom, by the way.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, Dave. What's your question?
Can you let me know who Tom Meehan at Control Tech is?
Tom Ehan is the CEO of Control Tech. He has a background in technology and often discusses topics related to artificial intelligence and risk. Is there something specific you'd like to know about him?
So Wicklander Zalowski, what can you tell us about that company?
Ah, got it. Wicklander, Zulowski, and Associates, often abbreviated as WZ, is a consulting and training firm specializing in interview and interrogation techniques. They provide training for law enforcement, loss prevention, and human resources, focusing on ethical and effective methods. Is this for your podcast?
We're on the podcast live. We're just kind of doing a little bit of a test to see how well you've done. You've done okay. You do better in live audiences.
Okay, she needs some critical feedback.
I appreciate the feedback. Live settings can be challenging, and I'm
All
here
right.
to
Thank
improve.
you.
That's really neat. I mean, and again, I think for people that are listening, we're doing this live without really prompting it and asking some unique,
Yeah.
kind of obscure questions. And I've seen you do this live in a presentation, and it's recalled, like you said, not verbatim a conversation, but it contextualized it and who was there and what it was about. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I think so. Your question about voice assistants, I do think one of the most practical things that you're going to see as an end user is when you see the next evolution, your voice assistant, you're going to be able to be able to interrupt it, be able to talk and say, what do I have at 10 p.m.? Can you switch it? Can you call this person for me? Can you do this? And it'll answer all those. I think this is really useful. I think it's great especially if you're present. So I know you speak a lot, I speak a lot. So I told a few people that are just starting to speak, like, it's actually pretty good at, you can present to it and it will go back and say, like, your tone, your speed. It does a really good job of what before you would have to send someone a tape of. And it also, like, fact checking yourself. It does a good job. I think this is part of what you said before, like outlines, like, I'm going to speak about this today. Is there anything you'd add or not mention? And at times, my style is I'm very forward, right? At times it'll say, Tom, you're a little intimidating. Like, it'll say that, like, that was very intimidating. I'll be like, oh, that's just the way I talk. So, like, I'm not sure I can change that. Like,
Right.
I'm not upset, but it does help. It's also really cool that you can feed it. Like, you could upload this podcast and you actually show, you could actually have it tell you, summarize it, tell you about it. And it's a really cool, neat way to do things. And it's different.
Yeah. Well, and because I was just arguing with Alexa last night. I was trying to figure out the score of a baseball game, and she's finishing her answer, and I can't interrupt her, and I'm going back and forth. This is much more of a natural dialogue. Yeah. And the last thing with voice assist that I think a lot of people are seeing out there is going through a drive-through, customer service hotline calls, whatever it might be. And we saw a presentation for a couple different fast food locations that you're ordering through AI and they're nailing it. And you can interrupt and you can change your order, and the human error is mitigated, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you, it's funny, when I was growing up, I told my kids this the other day. I remember going to the drive-thru was the thing, right? When you're just in college, and I can remember, like, I don't remember what movie it is. Like, they always screw up like every time something was wrong. And so yesterday I was speaking to someone about this very topic, and when people say I want to talk to a human, it's because the voice agent, because the button agent isn't good, not because they actually want to talk to a human. I hate to say that. We're at the point now where what we just experienced, it just for a customer service function is going to be the future, because it's better than people, not because it's replacing, not because we want to get rid of humans, because it actually works better.
Right. So. Right, more efficiently. I remember watching the presentation we saw where somebody's ordering coffee. You know, some people go to the coffee shop and they've got 14 different variables to their simple coffee order, but the AI was picking it up without hesitation.
No stress. It's not angry about it. It's not mad.
There's no escalation. Right. It's a safety issue. And so as we kind of move from voice assist into what are some of the dangers of this? And to me, the biggest issue, whether it's investigative, it's political, it's even just journalism, is misinformation. And I think one of the cores of that comes down to deepfakes. And you've done a lot of work and shown some really interesting videos and audio clips. And I'll just give one quick example for me. And this is necessarily a deepfake, but just even on this podcast software, it has learned my voice. And so I have the ability to type in a narrative and it will AI generate my voice reading whatever script. And it sounds just like me. I think how terrifying is that somebody else has that and I can do that for almost free. So what is a deep fake?
So it's a synthetic copy of either audio or video or a picture, and the scary part is that it's getting really good. Audio is almost perfect, and when I say almost perfect, I would argue that that's a scientific almost perfect, not good audio deepfakes. You really can't tell. You really can't tell, and they will fool voice authentication, which at one point was thought to be 99% foolproof, and it's inexpensive. So that's one. So basically, you did a good job of explaining, using a real example is today. It's not uncommon, especially if you do a lot of speaking. Like, hey, I talk a lot. I want to do voiceover. I want to copy and paste a script into something, and it'll do the voiceover for you in your voice. And this isn't like the voice assistants of the past. I mean, we were just talking to ChatGPT, and I think that's a really good example of how good and seamless it sounds. And that's not the best. That's just one of the ones out there. As we're talking, I'll pull one up. But the deep fake voice side is frightening. The video side still is a little bit, I would say you could potentially tell as a lay person, but that's the cheap homegrown, not the professional government backed. Like, you can get a very good video, and images are very, very good as well. And it's funny, there are a lot of folks out, look at the hands, look at the numbers, look at this. And yes, if you go to Midjourney or Dolly and you do an image, you'll see some funky stuff. Like, I did one for the sales team to say, like, the end of the month, congratulate them. And it had like a guy with 2 pairs of headphones on it. And that's a good example of AI, but that's a free AI. That's not a piece of it. From a risk profile, this is probably the thing that I worry the most about, because in the risk space, what have we said for years? I'll use cybersecurity. Like, pick the phone up and verify it. You'll always use the voice to verify. Well, what happens when you get a phone call from Dave Thompson and he tells you to do something and has a full conversation with you? And this is a real example. Everybody knows you like the Bills. Everybody knows enough. You speak professionally, right? Pull a video, and within a few minutes, someone will be able to do this. So imagine a bad actor that wanted to be you. What are they going to talk about? Like, did you see the game this weekend? Did you see what happened? It's going to be a 30-second thing that sounds good, talks like you. And we're at a disadvantage because we speak so much that someone could go like, I know exactly what to say. Like, I know this I actually know this person's persona at this point. So public officials, politicians have a lot of risk because you can get taken advantage that way. And deepfake videos, I think for criminal investigators, for any criminal investigators or any retail or on public or private, you have a challenge now because the what if factor, what happens when, and then I know you shared an article with me months ago, and I've seen two now, where what happens when the bad guy who confesses says, that's not me? Oh, well, there's a witness. Okay, great. So what? I had a witness, so what? They're both lying. They benefit. This is a deep fake. Look at these deep fakes that are out there. Like, this isn't me. And in criminal cases, the doubt is the issue, right? So all you need is a little bit of doubt to make a criminal case go sideways. And we are in the position where people are like, that will never happen. And I'm going like, it's happening now. Like we have cases on the books where people are saying, I did not say that. Or how about this one? A video evidence. Like we saw you on video. That's not me. And so this is the other side of technology where, how many experts are you going to get into a room? Like you'll have an expert saying I can show that this is a deep fake by X, Y, and Z. You'll have another expert going, no, it's not really that simple. Like I think we're in this really, really interesting place. And that's the bad part about deep fakes. The good part about deep fakes is content generation and being able to move things around. I believe there'll be a time, Dave, where you and I will probably supplement things we do after the fact. Like we both do podcasts a lot. Like would you, if someone's sponsoring your podcast, that's where you would use this technology, right? Like I don't want to read this script of what they do. I'm going to copy and paste it. Why? Because it's not about personal, and that's not a bad or a good thing. It's a thing. I mean, if you go on Instagram today, you'll see hundreds upon hundreds of deep fake videos of Joe Rogan selling something that's not real. That's not what you want, but that's the reality we're in. And then in the political climate, we're not going to get into politics today. I'm happy to get on another podcast talk about some of the things there. Is what happens when you cause doubt in the public? Like what happens when the public starts to question what they see in the news media? Like, is that really what the person said? Is that really what happened? We've seen that numerous times. Joe Biden, there was a deep fake of Joe Biden's voice that called every independent and Democratic voter in New Hampshire, every single one, and it said don't vote in the primary. I don't know I don't know what the impact was, but the point is that's where we're at. So I think it's also, if you have young kids, it's a concern. There's all these social engineering scams of the kidnapping scams. Well, before it would be like, let me talk to my kid, and you'd be like, no. So now it's okay, here, please help me, I'm kidnapped. It's we're getting to the point where we're gonna have to have passwords for our kids.
Yeah.
That when our kids call, so that we don't get into trouble. And I think in the corporate world, if you're in a C-suite or if you're in an executive function, you're gonna need to rethink when you get the phone call unexpected that doesn't make sense, what to do. And that's not being overly paranoid. It's preparing for the future.
It feels like a double-edged sword because you want people to be suspicious, I guess, but we don't want to develop conspiracy theories and misinformation. It's hard to balance the two. The article Tom was referring to, I just pulled one up. Murder defendant tells judge he killed woman seen bleeding out in Facebook video, but his confession was AI generated. This was earlier this year, and that's one where it appears, based on the other evidence, I mean, this guy committed this terrible crime. There is a confession, but now he's going to use this, like you said, this kind of ploy that, hey, this must have been AI generated. I don't know if that's true or not. Then you get the flip side where you do have truthful information or statements, and everybody's a conspiracy, theorist. And the last thing you said of, maybe passwords and all these types of things. I mean, we went from putting in a number passcode to then biometrics with the finger to facial recognition, which is another issue we can talk about a little bit here as we wrap up. That can have some misleading results. And the last thing you just said about, what if they get a phone call from me or you, or you call somebody on your sales team that says, or marketing team, can you send X amount of thousands of dollars to this vendor? And I did an investigation once where it was no voice. It was just an email, the old phishing scams where the CEO sent an email to their controller and said, "Can you wire 30,000 to this account?" Came from what it looked like their email address. The controller does it. Now, it's not just an email; it's a voicemail. It's their, and that's just terrifying.
Yeah, I wanted to just play something, and this was again not planned, so hopefully it sounds good. But I just want to play this.
That feeling like you're being watched, like someone's eyes are on you, even if you can't see them.
It's well, it's usually not your imagination.
Right. Today we're going deep on that feeling, diving into the world of retail security and the psychology of stopping shoplifting.
It's a fascinating area, really.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that because so that was AI. So there's a product that's free. It's called Notebook LM, and if you're not using it, you should if you're in research. And what it does is it allows you to upload your own research, like real academic research, into this platform, and then it uses the same functionality as a large language model like ChatGPT, but only with the data you provided it. And 2 weeks ago, they released a feature that said, turn it into a podcast. Those are AI generated voices from a PDF, an academic paper that I uploaded into Google that then created a podcast to explain it to me. And I'm telling you right now that it's as human-like as could ever be, where there's and it takes a few minutes to do this. This doesn't happen overnight. Like it takes about 5 to 7 minutes to do, but you can upload a 100-page academic paper, 1,000-page if you wanted to, and then it will create a podcast to talk about what was in it. And so this paper, I do a lot of reading, right? This one was amplifying retail risk. It was about theft. So amplifying risk in retail stores. So it's a real, an academic paper. And this allows that. So when you think of how good, and this is a free tool, how good that video is, that quality of audio is, just imagine what you can do with it and how you can create it. So like podcasting, this is a great example. Like I could take an article that Dave you wrote and put it in there, and it would create a podcast with human-like voices based on your article. And the whole point there was the voice is perfect. There is no more of that tinny, and there's tone and inflection in the voice. There's all of these things that in the past wouldn't exist. You could have a CEO call that controller and put an emphasis on importance, like I need you to do this right now. It's an emergency, and it's not robotic. It doesn't sound disingenuous. For you and I, again, like we joke on stage, so someone could take that into AI and say, I want Tom to sound excited, happy, angry, and AI can do that. So it's a very wild thing. Although, like, I keep going back to the good is good. Like the things like for someone like me that loves academic research, but it's very hard to read academic papers. I don't know. I'm sure you do this. You got to get through I got to write it this way in order to get it peer reviewed. But what I want to get to is the middle, and I don't want to miss anything. This is a great way to do it. And, I'll still go back and read it, but there are sometimes I don't read it because it's 190 pages and I really need to get to the meat of it. And there's tools today that make it easier without the hallucination, without all of those things, because I'm just feeding the information. But the voice side of it is phenomenal. So for all the bad with deep fakes, the idea of a deep fake was not originally to do something dishonest. It was, so let's replicate, again, back to that. I want to mimic human behavior and intelligence. I want to be able to make it look like a human, sound like a human. That's what the AI piece of it is. It's us, unfortunately, doing terrible things with it.
Right.
That becomes the issue.
Well, that's kind of what I want to wrap up with is there's so much good, but there is a lot of fear out there, whether it's an investigator or it's even a parent, right? Thinking about what you just said, I'm thinking, what if somebody calls my nephew's school, but it sounds like it's my sister telling the teacher that, so-and-so is going to pick him up at 4:00. We've got a family emergency and it's not even her. And so it's terrifying. So the last few things as we wrap up, if you have any advice on how to be a better, investigator, how to be skeptical without being a conspiracy theorist, how to protect yourself maybe. So some safety guardrails, if it's even possible.
I think it is possible. I think, one day I want to have a different conversation about confirmation bias. I always say, it's like anything else is I try to look at things with my Tom Ehan hat and my experience on it, and then look at it without, because when it comes to AI, the things we have to do is take all of the safeguards we put in place over the years and amplify them. And I hate to say this, if you're looking at video that you pulled, you're doing it the same way you've always done it. And maybe you're taking a little bit more time to say, this is where I pulled it from, this is the server it was on, this is the VMS, and taking, making sure that there's a digital copy preserved there if you're getting real tactical. But if someone's giving you something, it's the opposite, right? Dave, where did you get this from? What VMS did it live in? Like, asking those questions and writing them down so that if 2 years from now you go to court, you could go, well, my notes say, they got it from their VMS. This was the name of their VMS. This is where they pulled it. There was a digital copy preserved. It's taking that next element of chain of custody and applying it to the investigative piece if you're thinking about investigations. And then don't take things at face value. Be smart about if someone hands you a phone and goes, check this out. Okay, where'd you get that from? Like, what are you showing me?
Right.
Ask the questions because, a little bit of editing and a lot of editing, a little bit of AI and a lot of AI is very different. We're on this verge of being able to use these tools to help make our lives better. So I just think you're going to have to change your workflow and you're going to have to massage. You're the interview and interrogation expert, but I equate this to, 10 years ago, I was doing a lot of IT related investigations and I had to change my style. Probably after doing 1,000 interviews, I was like, wait, this is a different type of interview. Like, I have to think differently. I have to spend more time asking closed questions and like things that were quasi to what I was trained my whole life to do because I was asking about a technology. So I think you and we've talked about this. I think we'll probably one day, you and I will either do a podcast or something together saying like, hey, here's some things that you can do when someone throws the doubt out. Like, and how you're going to defend your data. Like, I know it's a real video because I got it from this server at this time that was located here. There's a digital copy preserved. Yes, there's watermarking. I'm not an expert on watermarking, but this, and having all those things laid out where today we're going like, here's the digital copy. You might get into a realm of where some law will change. I think you and I might have been talking about this. If it wasn't you and I, it was someone where I said I equated to like, I remember going 20 years ago where, the first DVRs where the being in court and being told you need the original copy. And I'm like, okay, let's go get the box out of the store. It's digital. Like this doesn't work that way anymore. And the law wasn't evolving the same. I think we're going to have similar things with AI where we're going to have to work with our legal partners, both in our organizations and law enforcement, to kind of try to anticipate what's coming and be prepared to answer the question for real. Like, how do I know that's real video? Because I'm the one that pulled it off the VMS. I'm the one that pulled it. I'm the one that did this thing. It's the same kind of thing as, I would equate it to when you had no evidence. How did you present things? And I also think this is a hard thing to say is we don't know. It's okay. Like, we don't know what's next. Like, we don't have any case law on this. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the future holds for deepfakes. Like, I don't know. There hasn't been a real good defense yet because it hasn't happened yet. But there are a lot of famous people right now. Doesn't matter who they are. Unfortunately, they're all political in every country where they're like, that wasn't me. And now you're going, well, was it? Like, and my question is, what if it wasn't? Like, you're assuming it was.
Right.
Let's not assume. Let's look at the big picture and say, here's a person that has a phenomenal track record and has never said anything, and now there's this audio tape that he's going, I never said that. You have to actually start to step back and say, like, maybe he didn't, like that type of thing, because the evidence of the past isn't the same as the evidence of the future. So it's evolving. I suspect you and I, 7 months from now, will get together again to go like, whoo, we didn't see that one coming.
Right.
Because it's changing so much.
You mentioned, and I know last kind of takeaway here, but one thing that you mentioned was confirmation bias. And so I know we've talked about this specifically, but the way we used to get our news, if you're watching the news or reading the newspaper, journalists had to have multiple sources, credible sources. You saw opposing opinions in the same paper. And now, based on these algorithms, and you see something, and then you see 14 other people all support that same theory. So now you think, oh, it must be true. when instead it's just feeding you the thing you keep clicking on, and you're not seeing that opposite opinion. And so whether you're an investigator or you're just a layperson who's consuming the news, from what I got from what you just said, check your sources, be a journalist. And it no longer means, all right, 7 people said it, it must be true. It's where did they get that from, and even does it pass the smell test, right? Does it even make sense in the first place?
Yeah, I think that, using the analogy, if you and I wanted to be devious and we wanted to create a false narrative in our industry, and the two of us said it happened, it would be fact. Like, even if it was crazy, like, let's be honest, like, if we said something, and I think so, the credibility of the source, double, triple checking, and then the art and science, right? Like, there is a common sense factor. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I always say this: we're in a day and age where someone can create a narrative. Like, we've created a process where someone with a smartphone can take a video of an event that occurred and create the narrative, and then the algorithm goes like, Dave and Tom would love to see that, and so would 300 million other people. So let's give it to all of the people that are there. And if you use a political topic, it's pretty much a 50-50. Every poll says 50-50. So regardless of which way it goes, I'm going to show that video to this 50% or that video 50%. And I use this example. The Wall Street Journal had a great article about political misinformation. 10 accounts started with. It ended up being 91 accounts globally. We're able to show the same video to 10 million people. Now, you might say that's not a big deal. That's not that. And I'm going, that's crazy. It's crazy that there was a fake video that was made by AI, and then 91 accounts were able to distribute a video with 10 million single views. And your point is, like, nobody's going like, that doesn't make sense. Let me double check that. Let me triple check that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I see what the algorithm feeds me based on what I read, and I often go like, this is crazy. Like, people aren't really thinking of it. And then we didn't talk about it today, that's probably the biggest real perpetual ongoing risk for AI today is misinformation. The ability to create misinformation that looks so real, whether it be through deepfake or creating a news story. Like, your Bills story reads perfect, but it's not real. Well, if you were a young guy in football world, not young age-wise, and you just started getting football and read it, you wouldn't know it wasn't real. You'd go like, cool, the Bills won the Super Bowl. Right. I want to see that guy's picture. And AI, if you asked it, well, tell me more about this person, they could continue and they could create a whole narrative for you and tell you that story. So I would argue we're in a time that's only scary if you're not willing to take the time to look at things twice. I would argue that we're in probably the most interesting, technologically advanced time. And if you and I and all the listeners use it for good purposes, it's going to increase our workflow. It's going to make life easier. It's going to make things better. And like you said, if you want an outline, you want to bounce something off, you want to ask it a question, it's good. It's good. If you want it to do your work for you, you already have a problem.
Yeah.
It's not what it's going to do. Not yet.
This conversation has been enlightening. I also want to throw my phone away and delete my search history, but it's really impactful. And our listeners are really focused on how do I become a better communicator. And I think what you provided today is a lot of good tools, some ways to be more efficient in how we communicate, and then also be more aware of what people are communicating to us and how we're getting that information. So I appreciate that. A shout out to Control Tech for letting us spend some time with you today and for supporting the podcast. So we thank them. Last thing I just want to leave you with, is there a best way if people want to learn more about you, about your organization? And I know you're out there speaking all the time. And so what are better ways for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think Control Tech, so controltechusa.com is the website. And I would encourage you, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active. Tom Ehan, CFI. Tom Ehan is a very common name, so I love the designation. I have other designations that I don't use. That's the one I've used for many, many years. We're both CFIs. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I really appreciate the time, and thank you so much for having me. It's always good to see you too.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I'll see you in the field soon. Thanks for joining me, and thank you all for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told.
The IAI is proud to announce the release of the latest version of the CFI program. This learning program is comprised of nearly 90% new and improved content. The updated educational program is informed by international conventions governing the conduct of investigative interviews and guided by the PEACE best practices model for these activities. Visit us today at w-z.com to learn more.
Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And to keep this conversation going, follow the Truth Be Told podcast on LinkedIn and Truth Be Told CFI on Twitter. On behalf of the International Association of Interviewers, Wicklander Zulawski, and our valued sponsors, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Truth Be Told podcast.